With 2 first-round edge rushers, James Pearce is on the rise and Jaylen Walker is stuck on the sideline, but maybe that's not as big a concern as we once thought.
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, everyone, to another illustrious episode of the Locked On Falcons podcast, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, your team every day. And if you don't know me, I'm your very humble host, Aaron Freeman, a.k.a. the iron that sharpens the iron, a.k.a. Sirius Black, a.k.a. Mr. a.k.a. And I've been covering the Atlanta Falcons for almost 2 decades, formerly at falcfans.com, RIP. Still going strong as the humble host of this illustrious podcast. We are coming up on 9 years hosting the Locked On Falcons podcast later this year in November, Thanksgiving. And I appreciate each and every one of you that goes strong with me as everydayers. That means you make this podcast your first listen each and every day. And all you got to do to become an everydayer is subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. So today's episode, we are joined by Josh Kendall of The Athletic to talk about his thoughts on Falcons training camp. We'll get into Jalon Walker and James Pearce, talk about Kaden Elliss, Michael Penix, expectations for this team. So without further ado, let's jump into that conversation with Josh Kendall right now. Welcome back, everyone. We are back with another illustrious guest here on Locked On Falcons. He is none other than Josh Kendall, who writes for The Athletic, covering the Atlanta Falcons. And we're going to be talking today about his observations in camp over these last 8 or so days. Josh, my friend, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Josh, this has been James Pearce week so far. I mean, he's been the guy that's been the talk of the town all week long, ever since he decided he wanted to start throwing hands on Sunday against some of the Falcons offensive linemen and been, not just picking fights in the practices, but apparently dominating some of these pass rush reps. His stock seems to be, skyrocketing on the rise. And I'm just curious to pick your brain. Are you going to be the latest in the various Falcons beat writers that are, pushing out the James Pearce hype?
Yes and no. I think I've been on the record, in these forums and in print that the Falcons took a big risk drafting James Pearce. It was going to go one way or the other. Through 5 training camp practices, they look good in the decision. He has, I believe, nobody charts this, or nobody with any sanity charts this, but I believe he has been on the field for more 11-on-11 practice snaps between the first and second, all the various combinations of players than anybody. They are working him like a dog. He is very active. His activity aggravates his teammates at times, which is probably a good sign. He spoke after practice today, said he is, he feels like he's fitting right in. He's enjoying his teammates. They're all getting each other better. Jesse Bates said earlier today that, they have a locker right next to each or close to each other. And James Pearce is not he is not a rookie who is, shy or worried about assimilating himself. He comes in, he wants to play his music. This is just who this is. And right now it's working out well for Atlanta. And I think Falcons fans would all relish a guy with some juice and with some attitude on the defense. And that's what he's provided through 5 days of practice. We've still got to see it on the field. We've got to see it over the long run. There are lots of questions to be answered, but he looks good right now.
Okay. Well, we'll leave it on that positive note there, Josh, in terms of James Pearce hype. But, as you talk about James Pearce looking good and getting a ton of reps in practice, one player who hasn't gotten a ton of reps, that's Jaylen Walker. And we did get some clarity from Raheem Morris this morning saying that he had a quote unquote minor hamstring issue that has kept him out and limited of practices these last 3 open practices this past week. Yesterday, I was talking with Maria Martin of 11 Alive, and we talked a little bit about his increasing absences, approaching maybe yellow flag territory when it comes to having a level of concern. What say you when it comes to the time that Jaylen Walker has missed?
So again, I apologize. I'm going to give you two answers. The
Okay.
negative one first. I don't believe in minor hamstring injuries. The hamstring worries me. Only second to my favorite NBA player has a calf injury would be my favorite NFL player has a hamstring injury. They can bedevil you an entire season, which is what I think Raheem Morris believes, which is why he is like at the first sign of any trouble, we're shutting this kid down. And that brings me to a positive injury, or the positive side of my question. I think that they feel really comfortable doing this with him. They, in many ways, don't view him as a rookie from a maturity standpoint, from an intelligence standpoint, from an ability to, take the system in, learn it quickly, be ready to go. So you hate for any players, especially rookies, to miss training camp reps, but they feel like Jaylen Walker can handle that, and they're not going to risk anything happening with that hamstring, because if you do something bad to a hamstring right now, you will see you in 2026.
Fair enough. That's fair enough. Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how this plays out the rest of the summer. But it is interesting that like James Pearce is getting all the buzz, while Jaylen Walker, due to absence, is getting far less of that buzz. And I think probably most people going into this summer and probably the season would have thought, hey, Jaylen Walker is the sure bet. He's going to be the guy that is going to be an impact player. And James Pearce, there's a lot of more questions about. And at least, again, as I think you explained it, Josh, the team, and I'm sure people still have less questions about Jaylen Walker, because when he's ready to play, they expect him to be ready to play. But I'm curious, sort of, did you have a similar view of that dynamic with those two in particular?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I view Jaylen Walker as a known commodity, and James Pearce as a real roll of the dice, as I've said. And through a week, we're talking about a week, we're talking about 5, official practices. It's been the exact opposite. James Pearce has been on the field the whole time. James Pearce is the talk of camp among offensive and defensive players. Even the ones who fought with him on Sunday had good things to say about him after that. His defensive teammates really like the way that he plays. And Jaylen Walker just hasn't been out there enough to make an impression. He hasn't participated in a padded practice, in a live session. He was in the walkthrough today, pre-practice walkthrough, but he has not really practiced in pads yet. So nobody's seen him. They all say, we like what we see. They just haven't seen enough. But I can't stress enough. It's August, early August. We've got a long way to go. So we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, definitely. Now, helping the Falcons, maybe mitigate some of those concerns with those two young players and what they're expected to do this upcoming season, they still have a veteran in Kaden Elliss. Josh, you've talked quite a bit about how Kaden Elliss has still a lot of value to this Falcons defense. And I want to talk a little bit more about that and what he potentially can be bringing to the table as we continue today's Locked On Falcons. Locked On has been very good to me these past few years, paying me quite a bit of money to host this humble podcast. But sometimes I wish managing my money could be a lot easier. And with today's sponsor, Monarch Money, it can be. Whether I'm looking to grow my savings or planning that big purchase, Monarch is going to put me, as well as potentially you, in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. They're not just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you can also build wealth. Reach your financial goals and take control of your finances with Monarch Money by using code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com, and you'll get 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year.
I was going to say, chiefly at age 30, he is still adding things to his game, which you don't see. I mean, this 30 is the cliff year. 30 is the year where you wonder if you're going to get anything out of a guy post 30. Instead, he's still on the rise. He's still honing his craft as an inside linebacker. And the reason for that is a lot of things. He's really smart. He takes good care of his body. But he essentially had 2.5, 3 redshirt years in New Orleans. He didn't play a ton. I mean, he didn't play much at all in those first 3 years. But they saw something. They brought him along. So while he's, maybe quote unquote entering his 7th year. This is kind of his 4th year as a player, and he's still really developing. I mean, I wrote today, nobody in the NFL has a better pressure percentage per defensive pass rush snap than Kaden Elliss in the last 4 years. Nobody. And it's not particularly close among guys who have more than 100 snaps. Now, that doesn't mean he's up there in sacks, because he only, he had 147 pass rush snaps last year compared to, the 300 and the 400 you see from the elite guys in the league who play defensive end. What Jeff Ulbrich is going to have to decide is, because he does that so well, what's the maximum amount of pass rush snaps I can give him without diluting that effectiveness? A, because, it hurts him in other areas of his game. B, because people just come to expect it more, so they're looking out for it, so that dilutes its effectiveness. That's going to be a fascinating thing to me. But I think Kaden Elliss is a really good and fairly underrated player. Underrated in the sense that I don't know that he's rated at all. You're just not going to see his name on any, top 10 inside linebackers in the league. You're not going to see his name pop up on any of those. And I'm not sure that's right.
Yeah, and you mentioned that sort of trying to find that wheelhouse, because we know how effective Kaden Elliss is as a pass rusher. And I know earlier this summer you wrote something along the lines of, him still having potential as a double-digit sack guy, even despite the fact that the Falcons have added young pass rushers like James Pearce and Jaylen Walker. And I'm just curious, do you feel like those guys, I think probably the traditional view is having guys like that, when you can get pressure with just 4 guys up front, you don't necessarily need to bring that 5th guy, which often has been Kaden Elliss the last couple of years. And so the general perception is like, oh, those guys are going to take away from Kaden Ellis's ability to contribute in that area. Well, I think sort of, if I'm misinterpreting, correct me on that, but some of the things that you've written seems to suggest that you only think that's actually going to help Kaden Elliss in that regard. So I'm just curious, why do you think that?
I think it depends on how they use him. I think that he has the potential and the ability, absolutely, to get double-digit sacks. There was a time, the week after the draft, 2 weeks after the draft, my thought was, Jaylen Walker is the next Kaden Elliss. He's a guy who can play inside. He can do a lot of things. They're going to, mold him into that type of player. The more I investigate it and the more I see his practice, what we've seen on the practice field, I think that Jaylen Walker may just be an edge rusher. I don't say that pejoratively at all. That's great. Just an edge rusher can earn you $40 million a year, so that's fine. But I'm not sure they're going to make him, a guy who plays all over the field. So, that takes away from, say, Kaden Ellis' sacks. Ideally, I think if Kaden Elliss gets double-digit sacks, it's not working exactly like Atlanta wants it to, because they do want that to go to Leonard Floyd, that to go to James Pearce Jr., that to go to Jaylen Walker. I just think he's got the ability to do that depending on how he's used.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah, we'll see. My main concern with Kaden Elliss has been that, we know he's one of the standout pass rushing linebackers in the NFL, as you explained earlier. The other aspects of playing linebacker, the run defense, the coverage, I don't think he's bad in those areas, but I think he becomes a little bit more ordinary in the sense of, he's not, as you say, like a top 10 linebacker when you're just focusing on the sort of traditional linebacker jobs that other players are doing. Do you feel like that's an issue, a concern, or do you feel like with this coaching staff, as others have expressed, because Jeff Ulbrich has that linebacker background, you have Mike Rutenberg, who's also a very good linebacker coach from his days in New York and now is the passing game coordinator. You have Barrett Ruud as that sort of position coach. Do you feel like there's still room to grow for Kaden Elliss? And has there been any indications through a week of training camp that he's getting better at these sort of quote unquote traditional linebacker duties?
According to Barrett Ruud and Jeff Ulbrich, yes, leaps and bounds. He is growing at an impressive rate there. But I share your concerns that, specifically the run defense, and it's not just Kaden Elliss specific. I think that, we could be sitting here in 6 months talking about how the Falcons fixed their pass rush. Congratulations. Nobody throws the ball because they can't stop the run. that's something that the Falcons are going to have to address. That's something that Jeff Ulbrich is going to have to figure out, because Kaden Elliss, Ruka, who I think is a very good interior pass rusher, but I'm not convinced. I'm not skeptical, but I'm neutral on the idea right now that he can hold up against double teams and stuff the run. How much are you going to have to play Khalid Kareem on the outside, because he at outside linebacker, because he can stop the run. Brandon Dorlus is not a big guy. Kentavious Street. Nobody wants to talk about Kentavious Street, but he's going to have to play for this team to stop the run, I think. TQ Graham, guys like that.
Okay. Well, you mentioned Khalid Kareem, and he's a player that has been sort of simmering below the surface as when people were talking about that edge rusher rotation, that D-line rotation. He's been a guy that I've heard a lot of people talk about popping in practices and whatnot. And so I kind of want to pick your brain on maybe a couple of other guys in addition to Khalid Kareem that have been sort of popping on that front. And we'll do just that to wrap up today's Locked On Falcons. So when you're trying to get your Michael Penix on and hit the golf course to improve your skills, you might need to make sure that you are sharp and energized. And that's where our sponsor, 5 Hour Energy, with their new transfusion flavor comes in. It brings the bold grape, ginger, and lime flavor of your favorite golf drink, minus the alcohol, into a quick, energizing shot. Whether you're sinking birdies or just trying to make memories with friends, it's a hole-in-one for your energy game. The 5 Hour Energy Transfusion with its grape, ginger, lime flavor is going to give you the best parts of your clubhouse go-to without having to chase down the bev cart. And if you go to 5hourenergy.com right now today, and that's the number 5hourenergy.com, you can use the promo code LOCKEDONGolf and you'll receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders, but whether it's meeting up with friends or trying to turn 18 holes into 36, get the energizing boost you need to power through by ordering the transfusion-flavored 5 Hour Energy shots today at 5hourenergy.com. Are there any other sort of players that may be flying a little bit under the radar in your view that have been standing out so far with a week plus into training camp?
It depends on how deep a cut you're looking for. Caleb Johnson is playing some second team inside linebacker, not a guy whose name I had mentioned at all coming into the year. Next to JD Bertrand, who we all know, that would be interesting. Josh Woods is, I think, is a guy that we all, our most listeners to your podcast know the name, has gotten some snaps at linebacker. Xavier Watts does not fit this mold because he's a third-round pick, but he was doing some first-team stuff and walked through today, although he did not play an 11-on-11, so he may have something like, that there may be an issue there that we won't know about for a couple of days. Not that I would think it's serious because, like I say, he was on the field, but we'll just have to wait and see. I guess I'm trying to rack my brain. I'm trying to visualize what it looked like out there today. I think that most of the names. I think it's D. Alford or Billy Bowman at the nickel. Jordan Fuller, is the placeholder at safety next to Jesse Bates right now. They signed as a free agent, but I'm not sure he excites anybody. I think they'd probably like Watts to take that job.
Speaking of Jordan Fuller, the Falcons did add a backup safety in Henry Black, while also working out a veteran safety in Jordan Whitehead. My conclusion off of that is I think the Falcons are just kind of looking for bodies to get through the preseason, just because we already know Jesse Bates is not playing in preseason. And I think the Falcons, for some of these other guys that are probably locks to make the roster, like a Jordan Fuller, like a Xavier Watts, they probably want to limit their snaps and get a couple of bodies in here just to, take up some reps in the preseason and potentially earn a practice squad spot. Do you think I have the right read of that? What was your read of the Falcons looking at some safeties the other day?
Yeah, 1,000%. I think that, Raheem Morris said this morning, they just didn't like their depth at safety. And I think, when you're talking about depth in August, that's exactly what you're talking about. Guys who are going to play against the Lions and the Titans over the next couple of weeks, and maybe the Cowboys in 3 weeks, depending on how it goes. But I don't imagine that Henry Black is a guy who fits into the 53-man roster anywhere.
Okay. Talking a little bit about Thursday's action, we got the first interception from Michael Penix. is the season over at this point in time because Michael Penix threw a pick in some of the drills?
It's not. I think that he'll survive.
Okay.
I'll say that I'm going to keep beating the drum. I'm going to keep saying he's got to be more accurate. I like everything that everybody else likes about Michael Penix. I think he could be really good, but he completed 58% of his passes last year. I know we can excuse that for a lot of factors, but accuracy has not been his calling card throughout his career, and he's got a long track record. We've seen a lot of tape. We've seen who Michael Penix is 5 years into his starting career, and he still sprays some balls. The interception he threw today was not a good one. You've got Drake London and Natron Brooks, back in the back of the end zone or midpoint of the end zone, and you throw that ball about 6 feet off the ground. That's not, that it was not a good throw. He has got to be more accurate. If this team is going to reach its offensive potential.
Now, my final question for you, Josh, is kind of, now that we're a week in, are your expectations a little lower, higher, or roughly the same for the team overall? But I guess for piggybacking on the Michael Penix point, do you feel better about the accuracy at this stage, even though you just broke down why it's still a concern? Or is it basically, are your expectations specifically for Michael Penix, where are they at relative to where they were maybe a week or two ago?
About the same place. I have seen this is early in training camp. I am not, just like I'm not ready to tell you James Pearce is going to have 10 sacks after week 1. I'm not here to tell you right off Michael Penix in any way, shape, or form. But what I've seen in week 1, I'm still worried about the accuracy issues.
Okay. So fair to say you see all the potential things for all the reasons that we all see with Michael Penix in terms of his potential to be a high-performing offense, some of the flashes that we saw last year, and obviously the success he had at the collegiate game, but still some things that have to clean up, which I guess, as we've been discussing all offseason long, there's probably going to be some ups and downs with a young quarterback going into his second year. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. And to be clear, I think the ceiling of Michael Penix, I think it's possible that the Falcons could be one of the most entertaining teams to watch in the league in 2026, because he can access every point on the field and wants to do that. And Zach Robinson will let him do that if he's hitting those throws. It could be a ton of fun. His arm talent is as good as almost anybody in the league. It's just the consistency. If he can rein in the consistency, get a little better handle on that, this team could absolutely be electric on offense, and electric in a way that is really fun to watch.
And getting to that earlier point I brought up about the expectations for the team, I think, and you correct me if you saw it maybe a little differently, the expectations for this team was that, because of that potential ceiling for this offense, one of the best offenses in the NFL, a defense that you hope will get out of the basement in terms of their performance last year with some of the improvements that they've made with the pass rush, with the improved coaching. You've expressed some of the concerns with the run defense. So I'm imagining when you look at where your expectations are for the Falcons team as an overall situation, as we sit here at this stage in the summer heading into the season, my guess is your answer is going to be it's about the same, but I'm just curious, where are you at with this team's trajectory now that we're 1 week into training camp?
About the same. I think everything I thought a week ago is still true. I'm more encouraged about James Pearce Jr. than I was a week ago. I think everything else, I'm still pretty along the lines that I was. And that was, for the 4 years that I've seen this team live and been working this beat, this team has not had a winning record. And it's to the prove it stage. I have come into the last 2 seasons, maybe 3 seasons, thinking that the Falcons would win the division, frankly. I do not think that heading into the 2026 season. Obviously, that doesn't mean that they won't. I've been wrong the last 3 years, but I think the Bucs have the potential, even without Liam Cohen, to be good. I will be very interested. I won't make any pronouncements, after week 1, but I'll be very interested to see how those two teams look in week 1.
Yeah. I think that's going to be, obviously it's one game, but like we've seen several times, it kind of sets the tone potentially for the rest of the season where, if you're the Falcons, you come out and beat the Bucs, you're like, okay, we're coming for this division crown. And if you're the Bucs, you're like, hey, Falcons, you still have a ways to go in that regard as far as season-long narratives. And I'm with you, Josh. They have lost the benefit of the doubt that I think we went into the last couple of seasons thinking, and the Bucs every year we're looking for reasons to sort of be like, oh yeah, the Bucs aren't going to do it again. And, I think they've earned the benefit of the doubt the last couple of years, but I do think, this Falcons team, if certain of these bets that they've made, particularly Michael Penix, do pay off, this team has a big ability to sort of, I don't know the words, sort of re-earn, I guess, that sort of benefit of the doubt, right?
I think they could exceed expectations. I think the Falcons being one of the surprise teams in the league positively is on the table. That's one of the potential outcomes of this season. I do think that ceiling is there. That's just that ceiling is going to take, several boxes being checked that just haven't been checked yet for me.
Yeah, I think that's I think that's a great way of putting it. Any other parting thoughts, Josh, before we get out of here about anything you saw today or anything you've seen so far over the last week?
I think we've covered most of the last week. I'm going to be very interested in what the Titans joint practices look like in 2 weeks. We all know that the preseason games mean almost nothing. Those are not the players that you'll see. But when they practice the Titans and Cam Ward here in 2 weeks, those will be the front line against the front line. Let's see what James Pearce looks like against those guys. Let's see how Michael Penix looks going up against a defense that doesn't know him backward and forward and that he doesn't know backward and forward. Let's see all that. That for me is what I've got circled.
Okay. Well, we look forward to it, Josh. Let the people know some of the things that you're working on over at The Athletic and any other things you want to plug.
Working on as much as we can write about Michael Penix. We'll have some Drake London stuff, an exciting Ryan Newsel feature coming down the pipeline at some point. We'll see. One thing interesting that I, hopefully is not too far down the line is a story about Tim Green, who Falcons fans obviously know, battling ALS now. But at the same time, Tim is now doing a podcast with his son, a podcast which is voiced by his actual voice. And it's a remarkable, the whole thing is remarkable. So we're going to tell that story, and it's been really fun to look into it.
Okay. Well, Josh, again, I really appreciate you. Stay safe out
Thank
there.
you.
For those people that don't know, Josh is at an undisclosed location that may or may not be near Lake Lanier. So, keep your head on the
stay out
swivel.
of the water. I'll stay out of the water.
Okay. Yes. We need you to come back and talk about those Titans joint practices in a couple of weeks, Josh. So please stay safe.
Okay. All right.
So, guys, I want to thank Josh Kendall of The Athletic for giving his insight into camp so far. We will continue breaking down Atlanta Falcons training camp, as the summer rolls on. But of course, for those of you checking us out on Thursday night on YouTube, football is back between the Hall of Fame game between the Chargers and Lions. And if you want to get insight into that matchup and all the big takeaways, you can check out Locked On Lions, of course, Locked On Chargers. And if you're just looking for some other ways to make money this summer as well as this year for whatever reason, check out Locked On Bets as your second listen. Kevin Rogers, Lee Sterling are going to give you those NFL futures as well as MLB locks. It is all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.